Hi there and welcome to Infogol's Championship preview. It's obviously the 2018-19 season and the Championship looks a very competitive league once again. With me is Mark Taylor.
Hi Jake.
Hi mate. To go through all of the teams and produce the best bets for the upcoming season. So in alphabetical order, we'll start with Aston Villa. They have hit the news for all the wrong reasons in recent weeks with financial fair play troubles. Last season they were very impressive, Mark, in terms of process.
Yeah, I mean they weren't a natural team for promotion. They were just below that level. They were a very solid playoff side. They created decent chances. The expected goals they created were about half a goal per game above those they allowed. So they were a solid top six side. As I say, not naturals for promotion. They did get to the playoffs and then they fell short. They finished the season particularly well, but as you say, they're in financial turmoil at the moment. So whatever they did last year may not reflect in what happens this season.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they do deal with the off-field issues and whether that does affect their start to the season. Going across the city to Birmingham. Now, Birmingham were in relegation trouble when Gary Monk was appointed at the end of last season, and Gary Monk really did turn things around at Birmingham.
Yeah, I mean they didn't have a great first half of the season. They finished fairly strongly though. They again around about mid-table side, looking to be fairly similar this year.
Yeah, mid-table is definitely on the cards again for those Blues. Blackburn gained promotion from League One at the first attempt, finishing second behind Wigan. And going back to the 16-17 season, they were actually very unfortunate to go down according to their process. We're expecting them to be pretty safe this year.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the three teams that went down, Wigan, Blackburn, Rotherham, are all now back up. Of those three, Rotherham were particularly poor. The other two very slightly unlucky. They had decent process. They created chances that could have kept them up, and it just shows how competitive the bottom of the Championship is, where a little bit of luck here, a little bit of bad luck there can see you relegated, even when you are creating chances that should normally get you a mid-table berth, and that's probably where we see Blackburn finishing on their return to the Championship.
And he talked a bit about luck there, and the one team that was very fortunate last season was Bolton, and you have a very good story about the last day of the season in terms of Bolton's survival.
Yeah, I mean Bolton's profile, their underlying process was that of a relegation side. If we take Burton as the typical relegation team, they conceded around about 1.5 goals per game. Expected goals and only created under one. So if we take Burton as the archetypal relegation profile, Bolton's was very similar to this. Going into the last game of the season, I was live tweeting the chances that which teams go down. With about 5-10 minutes of the season to go, I was just tweeted that Bolton had about a 3% chance of staying up, whereupon they scored 2 goals and it shot from 3% to 95%. So the last 5 minutes of the season were very fortuitous for Bolton. Kept them in the league, kept them in the division, but it wouldn't have been a surprise to see them go down. They weren't a particularly good side on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, they're expected to face a bit of an uphill battle this season also. Brentford had a very solid season once again. We're getting used to seeing them in the mid-table and pushing the playoffs. Infogol model calculated that they were the 5th best team in the Championship last season, and their process was pretty steady again.
Yeah, I mean they started well to about game week 20, game week 25, and then their offensive production fell away slightly. Their defence became slightly worse. They were about a mid-table side for the second half of the season, a promotion side for the first half of the season. So it just depends if they can continue the way they started last year.
And as we're used to seeing with Brentford, they do consistently sell their prized assets, with Egan going to Sheffield United this season and Joseph soon joining Derby. So many people aren't fancying them to do as well this season as they did last, but do not underestimate them going into this campaign.
Yeah, I mean they do tend to, you know, buy undervalued assets and sell them to profit. So that is the risk you take with Brentford. If they are doing well, they may sell half the side.
Exactly, yeah. Now, one team that caught the eye in the early season, last season, was Bristol City. They started really, really well, and many people were confident that they would finish in the top 6, but ultimately they fell away towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if we go to the previous season, teams that finished the season well, Wolves finished the season well. They hadn't spent the money then. They had a really good end to the season. A really good season. They just couldn't actually turn it into results. So they had a good process there. Same with Cardiff City when Warnock took over. They were a very good side for the rest of the team, the tenure of that season, and they carried it on to the next season. Bristol City again we fancied them to do quite well, and they started well. They didn't finish well. And at the end of by the end of the season, they were pitching at a below mid-table side. So it was very much an up and down season for Bristol City.
Yeah, they may find this season a little bit tougher as well, having lost Bobby Reid and Aidan Flint, two of their star performers last season. They both moved on, which has probably weakened Bristol as a side. One team that's got plenty of people talking is Derby. Gary Rowett chose to leave the Rams, with Frank Lampard being brought in as his successor. Many people are advocates of Lampard being in charge at Derby, and he's made some interesting signings. But last season they made the playoffs, they were beaten, and their process was probably around that mark.
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a few Derby fans. I live between Derby and Stoke, so it's the A50 Derby is now back on again. Derby fans weren't particularly unhappy to see Rowett go. They seem quite delighted that they've got a big name manager. Of course, big name managers don't necessarily, big name former players don't necessarily turn into successful managers. Bobby Charlton, excellent player. Jackie Charlton, not quite so good. Jackie Charlton, much better manager. The thing I keep hearing from Derby fans is that Derby start well and that they finish poorly. And looking at the data, that appears to be what happened last year. They were a promotion top 6 side, not necessarily automatic promotion, and then the last 10 games their form fell away. They got beaten in the playoffs. So Derby obviously hope that Lampard's name can attract loan signings, and you know whether loan signings alone can get you promotion is another matter.
Yeah, that seems to be what has happened. They brought in Mason Mount, Harry Wilson from Chelsea and Liverpool respectively, two good young prospects, which I think will add a nice blend to what is already at Derby with the experience of Tom Huddleston and David Nugent and players like that.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a case of tired legs towards the end of the season, you know, obviously young more peak age players, you know, players, you know, whose legs don't go, you know, as we reach April, May, might be a help there.
Yeah, one team that did struggle last year, somewhat surprisingly for many, was Hull. They got relegated from the Premier League, and they were in a relegation battle for long periods of last season, until Nigel Adkins came in, and then you saw a big upturn in their process.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how they were creating chances and allowing chances, they were not very good in the early part of the season. First half of the season, you know, they had a typical relegation profile, but you know, once the managerial change, you could see a change in the data, in that they were then creating more chances. Even if they weren't particularly taking them, they were, you know, creating chances, and the defensive side of the game also improved. So yeah, I mean, if you look at Hull's overall performance last year, you might not immediately think they might do well this year, but I think there's probably cause for a little bit of optimism.
Absolutely.
At Hull. Yeah,
that Hull team could surprise a few people this season. One team that seems to be trending in the opposite direction, have been for a number of years now, is Ipswich Town. They finished mid-table last year under Mick McCarthy, but towards the end of the season, many fans were getting a little bit unsettled about the style of play that Mick McCarthy was bringing to the team. And that ultimately led to him leaving and then bringing in Paul Hurst as the manager. Now, their process has been poor for a few years and they have been overperforming, so what can we expect at the upcoming season?
Yeah, I mean, if you see a team that is, you know, scoring more goals than they perhaps, you know, their underlying expected goals suggest they may do, or they're letting in fewer goals, it's possibly down to you know, tactical quirks that the manager, you know, has brought to the club. So in losing Mick McCarthy, you know, be careful what you wish for. It may be that McCarthy's influence was one of the factors that you know, made them overperform their, you know, their poor looking underlying statistics. So we didn't think Ipswich were a very good side last year. Poor sides do stay up in the Championship, you know, because luck and variance and other sides being even poorer than them. But Ipswich, I think we you know, we do fancy that they may struggle.
Yeah, and another interesting one in this league is always Leeds United. They were all over the place last year, bringing in Thomas Christensen at the start of the campaign and finishing with Paul Heckingbottom. And their underlying process got considerably worse under Paul Heckingbottom. It'd be interesting to see what happens now under Marco Bielsa, who's obviously is a big name manager, but going on from what we had last season, not much is expected of Leeds this time around.
I know last year we predicted Leeds would be mid-table. I think we said 13th, and Leeds fans weren't very happy with that prediction. They suggested that the prediction was nailed to the dressing room door so that the Leeds players would prove
motivational tool.
Yes, would prove us wrong, and Leeds to their credit did prove us wrong. They finished one place higher than we predicted. So they had their patches of very poor form. They don't look a very impressive side based on last season's statistics. We're suggesting that they'll be mid-table again.
Yeah, that could very well be the case. Bielsa is known for his open, expansive attacking football, which is not something that you see regularly in the Championship. It could either be a stroke of genius or it could be a disaster. So keep an eye on Leeds. They will be entertaining to watch next season. Middlesbrough came very close under Tony Pulis to returning to the Premier League at the first time of asking. They were beaten in the playoffs by Aston Villa. And their process was very much what you'd expect from a Tony Pulis side, creating very little and conceding very little.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Pulis, we all know where Tony's coming from as a, you know, a former Stoke manager. He's, you know, he majors on defence. He starts off with the premise that if teams can't score against you, at least you get a draw. They didn't allow a huge amount of expected goals. Neither did they create many. Towards the end of the season, they did hit a purple patch of scoring. They were scoring 2 goals a game, even though their process suggested that they should only be scoring, you know, 1.2 goals per game. That caught them out in the playoffs. They played 2 legs. Didn't score a goal. So scoring is always going to be a problem at Middlesbrough while Tony Pulis is there. He's great at keeping teams in divisions. Perhaps not the best manager you have if you're trying to actually get promotion, where you have to take the lead and you know, commit teams and score goals.
Absolutely. They are expected to be there or thereabouts in terms of the playoff reckoning at the end of the season, just purely based on the fact that Pulis can get his team really organised, which is always an asset in the
Championship. And he's, as you say, he's bought some defenders now who score goals.
Yeah,
so
Aidan Flynn, yeah.
That's Tony Pulis's dream player.
Absolutely. A team that surprised many last year was Millwall. They had a really impressive run towards the end of the season, a long unbeaten run. And they did finish around where they deserved to, just outside the playoff places. Are we expecting something similar from them this time round, a sort of mid-table finish?
Yeah, if you look at Millwall's results, I mean, they as you say, they had a really quite an impressive unbeaten run towards the end of the season. Perhaps not. If you look at the underlying stats, they perhaps didn't deserve to, you know, to win or, you know, not lose as many games as they did. Their process is very much that of a mid-table side, you know, with probably looking up rather than looking down. They took a little bit of time to adjust to the new league. You know, they were conceding, you know, a fair few chances early on. They tightened up in defence towards the end of the season, and their attacking creation also, you know, gradually improved. So yeah, I mean, a solid mid-table side, and you know, well done for, you know, a team that was, you know, only recently promoted.
Definitely, yeah. One side that was pretty underwhelming last year was Norwich. A lot was expected of Daniel Farke's team, but they really did disappoint. They finished in the bottom half of the table. They were very average the best of times, and were especially poor defensively, conceding quite a few chances in.
Yeah, they got worse defensively as the season went on. They got slightly better on the attacking side as the season went on. They were just a completely ordinary mid-table. Didn't really look like going up. Didn't really look like going down. Typical side. They became slightly more entertaining towards the end of the season than they were at the start, and can't really see much changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And another team which were also very disappointing last season was Nottingham Forest. Their process was very poor, but once Aitor Karanka did come in, there was a considerable change in both the attack and defensive.
Yeah, I mean, there was a very slight uptick in the amount of chances they were creating. The defence got slightly better. It's again, it's difficult to know what to expect from Forest. Whether, you know, I think they'll probably be slightly looking up. They finished the season, you know, on the uptick, but you know, still a mid-table side.
Yeah, they've been ploughing quite a lot of money in this year,
Yeah.
signing some really unknown quantities that no one has any sort of idea what they will be like. But one player that might be key for them is Lewis Grabban, who was 20-goal season last season in the Championship for both Sunderland and Aston Villa. So yeah, they probably are looking up, but they probably will be just outside of those places.
Yeah, I mean, money does talk. You know, I mean, obviously the relegated sides coming down from the Premier League will have a lot of money to spend in it, and you know, the ability to spend, you know, 25 million, you know, which Forest have done, obviously puts you, you know, hoping to at least make the playoffs.
Definitely, yeah. One team that I know impressed you last season was Preston. Their performance was, their process, was very impressive throughout the season, and they were rather unlucky not to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they had their ups and downs, but if you smooth, if you take a rolling, you know, 10-game average and just look at the trends, they you know, they did create more chances than they allowed, and the defence got, you know, very slightly better. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't scream automatic promotion. But yeah, Preston do look a solid bet to you know, at least be in and around the playoff positions. Yeah,
they'll definitely be in the picture once again. But one team that we think will be another mid-table to bottom half table team is QPR. The end of the season they parted ways with Ian Holloway and brought in Steve McLaren, but haven't really backed him with any sort of funds or players being brought in. So it's very much the same sort of squad as to what Ian Holloway had to work with last year. And that was the sort of squad that was deserved to be where they finished.
Yeah, they started off as a slightly better on attack than the defence. They we were looking at positive goal difference. Then they had a horrendous sort of mid-season and ended up back where they started, you know, with a slight improvement towards the end. So again, mid-table, you know.
Yeah, don't expect too much from QPR. Another team not to expect much from is Reading. Now, obviously they were beaten playoff finalists 2 years ago, but even in that season the underlying stats were very, very poor. They were that of a relegation threatened team, and that's what it proved to be last year, and they seemed to get worse as the season went on.
Yeah, Reading, as you say, they very nearly made the Premier League. They were beaten in a playoff shootout with Huddersfield. We had a very, very poor underlying stats record for them. It was mainly down to Al Habsi, the goalkeeper, who, you know, had a absolutely superb season. 30-plus goalkeeper. He left. Reading's process remained the same in that they were giving up loads and loads of chances. Instead of winning games 1-0, they were losing games, and they were still in contention to actually go down. On the last day of the season, we predicted they'd be in the bottom half of the season. As you say, they'd almost got promoted. The process throughout last season, it wasn't bad in the first half, and it reverted to being typical Reading, and that they were giving up loads of chances in the second half of the season. So we expect them to struggle again.
Yeah, Paul Clement has a lot of work to do if he is to make sure Reading are 100% safe in this upcoming season. Another team that are expected to struggle is Rotherham. As we've stated already, they came up alongside Blackburn and Wigan, and the season that they did go down, they went down without much of a fight. They were very disappointing, and their underlying stats were dreadful.
They particularly on defence. I mean, they were allowing 1.8, 1.9 expected goals by the time they were relegated. They never really in with a chance of staying up. They come back with broadly the same squad, broadly the same manager. So broadly, we would expect the same similar outcome. They are favourites to go down, and you know, it's no secret why.
Yeah, and a team close to Rotherham, Sheffield United, a team that you quite like the look of coming into this new season.
Yeah, I mean they were promoted. They made a really good start to the season. They tailed off slightly over Christmas, and then continued their good run. Late in the second half of the season, didn't particularly show up in the actual results they were achieving, meaning they missed out in the playoffs. But no, they were playing as well at the start of the season as they were at the end, and they look a really solid, you know, team to continue that next season. Certainly to be the best team in Sheffield.
Yes, Chris Wilder does have his side playing very well, and they were unlucky to make not make the playoffs, as you've already stated, and they could very well challenge again. And across the city, Sheffield Wednesday, they had a really indifferent season from the past couple where they made playoffs on both occasions, partly down to injuries through most of the first team, but their process throughout the season was really poor.
Yeah, I mean, going back to last season where we said, you know, we like Wolves, we like Cardiff, we like Fulham. Another team that had a very good process going into last season was Sheffield Wednesday. They were one of the few teams that didn't actually, you know, produce the goods on the field, despite their underlying stats. As you can say, they do have excuses, and that they did have a lot of injuries, but really from 30 games on, the remainder of the season, they were performing like a relegation side, even though they were managing to score goals and nick points. Hopefully that will all change, you know, if they can get a fit squad. But you know, watching brief on Sheffield Wednesday, I think at the moment.
Yeah, like you said, if everyone does get back to full fitness, they're still the same squad that made the playoffs and were beaten by Huddersfield 2 years ago. So there's no reason why they can't get back to that process of that period. A team that has come down, Stoke City. They were very poor in the Premier League last season. They had the worst defensive process of any team in the top division. Deservedly came down. Will they bounce back up?
Well, Stoke's problem started not last season, the previous season, where overperforming goalkeepers rather masked their decline in defensive output. It was mainly due to keepers, you know, saving more shots than you would expect based on the quality of the shots they were facing. This was mainly Lee Grant, who now has secured himself a move to Manchester United on the back of that season. Yes, Stoke and also Swansea, which we'll talk about in a moment. They looked the typical relegation profiles. They conceded about 1.5 goals per game, expected goals. They were only scoring about one expected goal per game. Stoke's even dipped lower than that. They lost Shaqiri. He's gone to Liverpool. They lost Arnautovic the previous season, two great big contributors to their expected goals contribution. So I noticed they're favourites to be promoted. Obviously, that's based on the amount of money they'll potentially spend. Rowett's a new manager. He's not had any success in actually getting teams promoted. He's managed around the local clubs, Burton, Derby, Birmingham. So I think Stoke are too short at 6-1.
Yeah, I definitely agree that they are undeserved favourites to go up, but they do have a very strong squad. Like I said, they've got a manager that knows the league, so that there's every chance that they could give a really good shot going straight back
Yeah,
up.
I mean, potentially he's probably got more money to spend than he's ever had. So, you know, they've made a few purchases. You know, they've kept Joe Allen, which is a bonus. Although after the first season, he was excellent. He was integral in keeping Stoke in the Premier League. Probably took a little bit of a toll on him the last season, and he wasn't quite as impressive. But you know, if you're keeping players of those calibers, you've always got a chance. So I just think 6-1's a bit short.
Yeah, they talked about players of a certain calibre, and that is definitely something that Swansea have at their disposal. Also relegated, deservedly relegated. They have a really strong squad to have a really good challenge to come back up. They've got Graham Potter in as the new manager. What can we expect from the Swans?
Well, the Swansea went down with a very similar profile to Stoke in that they weren't a particularly good Premier League side. They had a little bit of luck with variance around about game 30 odd, where they picked up a few points. They could have stayed up. They ended up in a head-to-head with Southampton to more or less winner-takes-all game to see who could stay up. They lost that at Swansea. You probably say they deservedly went down. Potter is obviously an unknown quantity. He's done very well with in the Europa League with his previous club. He's played around the leagues. He played with Stoke, you know, pretty 20 odd years ago. So it'll be interesting to see. As you say, Swansea, they've also kept their core squad together. But along with Stoke, they were a typical relegated side.
Yeah, I think it could be key keeping the squad together, which they're obviously allowed to do because of the finances they get in parachute payments. They can afford to keep paying the wages. So they definitely have a slight advantage on the teams that are already down there.
And I mean, the window is fairly short to take advantage of that advantage.
Absolutely. Another team that falls into that bracket is the third team that came down from the Premier League, which is West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah, I mean West Brom came down. They were bottom of the league, but they were probably of the three, they were probably the most unfortunate team to go down. They weren't particularly bad, but they just had to let loads and loads of goals in. They were expected to allow about 1.2 goals per game, and towards the end of the season particularly they were allowing 2 goals per game. So they may have had a little bit of bad luck. If you look at the raw stats, they were the most impressive side that went down. It'll be interesting to see how they perform in relation to the other two teams who did finish above them.